and build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along.
Good afternoon. Today is 22 November 2011. My name is Stan Hobson, and I'm here at the Warhawk Air Museum in Nampa, Idaho. Today I'll be interviewing Arne Espedal for our Veterans History Project in partnership with the Library of Congress. The camera operator is Don Carson, and we have Larry's joining us for a brief session. Appreciate you coming in and visiting with us. Thank you so much. If you would please state your full name, address, and birth date.
Sure. My name is Arne Olaf Espedal. I'm a junior. I live here in Nampa. Have lived here for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
What else was your name?
Address?
Oh, sure, address. 12456 Karcher Road, Nampa, Idaho.
Born where and when?
Born in Seattle, Washington, December 7th, 1947.
Okay, and you were in the Army?
I was in the Army.
Okay, from?
Went in the service January of 1965 and got out in October of 1969.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, Arne, we want to thank you for coming in and visiting with us a little bit. I understand before we started this process that you're Scandinavian. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Half Scandinavian. My father came from Norway.
Okay, interesting. I've not seen that spelling on a name before.
Espedal, there's actually a small town in Norway called Espedal.
I see.
At the beginning of one of the fjords.
Uh-huh.
Not too far from Stavanger, Norway.
Okay. Born in Seattle, 1947.
That's correct.
Did you go to school there?
Went to Ballard High School, and school was mostly Scandinavian. Swedish and Norwegian were in Ballard, and Ballard is also one of the Seattle's fishing fleet ties up there. When I was a kid, Dad was a commercial fisherman.
He was okay, he was. So you worked the boat in the summer times?
Never did.
Never?
No.
Oh, how lucky can you be, huh?
Actually pretty lucky, because when Dad first got fishing, they up in the Bering Sea, they didn't actually use motors. They sailed those boats up there, and they're only 60 feet long in those rough waves.
That's quite a story in itself, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, that's true. Okay, and you enlisted in the Army?
Yes.
What caused you to do that?
Well, probably if I hadn't done something different with my life, I would have been off on a different direction altogether. I probably wouldn't have enjoyed. I wasn't given a choice to go in the service or what. I just took it upon myself to go on in. I actually dropped out of high school and went in when I was 17.
Okay.
When I got into the service, I took my basic at Fort Ord, California. I'm sorry, not Fort Ord. Took my basic in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Fort Ord was closed at the time for meningitis.
Oh.
So then from there I went up to Minnesota, where I was a radar operator on the Nike missile base. And I was out in the cornfields of Wisconsin, part of Minneapolis-St. Paul Air Defense Command. Got tired of the cornfields. It seemed like it was nothing but guard duty and KP and an operation control line, which was part of the battery of the missile base. And so I took what they called it short. From that time on, I enlisted for 3 years. I'd already had a little over a year in the service, and then went for an additional 3 years from that point on. So I'd go to school, and I went to school as an airplane mechanic. Fort Eustis, Virginia. From there I graduated and went to Fort Ord, California. I knew we'd get there sooner or later. They didn't have any room for airplane mechanics at that time. They were overloaded with it, so I ended up in a electronics shop. Well, I thought that was a shame after my schooling. So I was hoping to get out of there, or at least work in my military occupational service, MOS. And they didn't have any spot for me. I ended up in the fire department for a while.
In Fort Ord?
At Fort Ord.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally just got fed up with the whole thing and wrote Senator Jackson of Washington State. Within 2 weeks, 70 of us were on orders for Vietnam.
Is that what you requested?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to work in my MOS.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I didn't know where it was going to take me, but
Yeah.
so I got ordered to Vietnam.
Did you assigned to a unit before you went, or?
No, I just went over there as an individual, then assigned a unit once I got there.
Okay.
And I think I ended up with maybe 2 people that I knew in school, and the rest, just scattered.
What unit were you assigned to?
In Vietnam, it was the 605th Transportation Unit, part of the 520th Battalion. It was an aviation unit. Most of the company I was with were helicopters. I was a fixed-wing mechanic. And there's only a couple of us, the rest were all helicopters. And I was always getting a bad time, they were always giving me a bad time about fixed-wing aircraft. They can't hover and they can't fly backwards. And so, I mean, that's just part of what goes on. But went up on a test flight one time, and the captain says, can't hover, huh? And so he lowered the flaps, and we brought that. It was what they call a bird dog. It was a single-engine fixed-wing aircraft they used for observation over there. But he brought the flaps down and nosed it up a little bit, and we kept slowing down, and I knew that he'd put in a stall if he kept doing that.
Yeah.
I said, well, that's fine, and he says, can't fly backwards, huh? And I said, no, don't do it. And anyway, he recovered the aircraft and we landed safely. But we were required to go up on test flights if we did something major to the aircraft, like change, they call them jugs, but a piston cylinder situation. But again, I wasn't really satisfied. Safety wiring turnbuckles inside the fuselage of aircraft and on. I was always looking for something different. Well, I was put on the bunkers for 30 days. Everybody in this huge base camp, at the time was actually the largest heliport in the world, is where I was stationed. A place called Phu Loy, Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And, excuse me. Had a large airstrip. We were just a little bit, let's see, that would be west of Bien Hoa in Vietnam.
Okay.
I could show you on the map.
Yeah, why don't you point that out?
Right, here's Saigon.
Yeah.
And we were about 30 miles north west of Saigon, right about in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent all my time in Vietnam at that one particular base camp.
Okay.
Didn't go anywhere else.
Okay.
Phu Loy was kind of a combination of rice paddies and jungle. It wasn't your triple canopy type jungle. It was a more brush and banana trees and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was saying, I wasn't satisfied being an airplane mechanic either.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure out what I wanted out of the Army until one day I figured out it was me. But
Tell me, when did you get to Vietnam? What was the date? Or, not precisely, but...
no, I can't quite remember the exact date. It seemed like it was the springtime of 1967.
67, okay.
Yeah, that was
You went in
early
65 and had a year of training.
Before I went to Vietnam, well, I
Yeah.
went to aviation school.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That was
Okay, yeah, spring of 67.
right.
Yeah, all right. Very good.
And I was put on the bunkers for 30 days, and about that time, General Westmoreland said that if any large base camp, such as we were, a large heliport, didn't have infantry to patrol its perimeters, they would form a unit from different units within that large base camp to act as the infantry. That would be the first line defense outside the perimeter.
Okay.
So I thought that sounded kind of interesting. I was looking for more adventure.
Are you a PFC?
I was a PFC at that time.
Okay.
When I got to Vietnam. I was a PFC when I went to school.
Yeah.
After I'd been to Vietnam
Okay. So you went into the defense system at the base
Exactly.
as a PFC still?
I think it was a PFC. Yes, I was.
Okay.
Either a PFC or I think I may have been Spec 4 then. I'm not sure.
Okay.
When that came
And
about.
what was your function?
As part of this unit,
Yeah.
well, basically just ground pounder or grunt, basic infantry. We were, later turned out to be more reconnaissance and night ambush and roving patrols, just protecting the outside perimeter of the base camp.
Okay.
And we'd work every day. Usually, almost every night we'd have 1 or 2 night ambushes that we would set out. We would patrol anywhere from the outside the fence to 5,000 meters out. And sometimes it would be roving patrols where we would
Okay.
work with 5-man teams. And we'd get back into our base camp every day, but
Was this 5,000 meter, was that a circle around the base?
from the perimeter on out,
Yeah.
5,000 meters
Yeah.
out, we wouldn't
But it
travel.
went all the way around the base. So you were
Right.
isolated essentially. The base was out there by itself. It didn't have roadways or access to
Oh, no,
Saigon.
base camp was a very large base camp and didn't have roads.
Okay.
Highway 13 ran near the base.
Okay.
We could, yeah, it was actually quite large. I couldn't tell you how many miles, but
Yeah.
probably several miles by several miles.
Yeah.
Large enough that 707 almost landed at our airstrip one time,
Oh, really? Oh.
thinking it was Benoit because we were just due west of Benoit.
Oh, okay.
And he almost sat down there.
Now, on your patrols, is this some of these are nighttime patrols?
Yes, most of them were.
Okay. And how big a patrol unit would you have? 4 guys, 5 guys?
Usually would work in 5-man teams.
Okay.
Usually 2 patrols might be going out. We had gone out as strong as 12 men.
All armed the same, or some with radios and some with bars or BARs or something like that?
We had everything, anything we can get our hands on. We
Okay.
did have a Browning automatic rifle, 30 caliber. We had one of those. We had Thompson submachine guns. We had, what was the other machine gun? Thompson. We had the,
Carbines and M1s,
Yeah,
or
right.
not M1s in those days. It was,
no, I did have the M14 I started out with, and later got the M16, but
yeah.
I did retain the M14, which we mounted a starlight scope on. And I would work at night sometimes on the bunker line as a sniper. And there were several places. We had some towers that were 60 feet high that we could get up into and watch a large portion of the perimeter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're also kind of a target, aren't you?
You would be, yes. They tried to keep the lights pretty well down around the perimeters.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't show up much, but at night you could be if you had the moon. You know, that's one thing that played a very important role I discovered over there was the moon, when it came up and when it set, or if we had it at all. If the moon was to come up, say at 2 o'clock in the morning, Charlie would usually our enemy would usually get active before midnight. Or if the moon was to come up at, say, 10 o'clock and be up all night, it was usually a fairly quiet night and you wouldn't have to worry too much. We would, a lot of our ambushes we would set up in rice paddies. If it was during the monsoon season, you'd be laying in the rice paddy, fully submerged except for your head sticking out. And if you laid there long enough, water around you would get somewhat warm and you'd be a little bit comfortable. You got to remember, you get climatized over there. What was 70 degrees felt cold.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And how do you protect your weapon if you're in a rice paddy?
usually you'd have it up on the rice paddy
Oh, okay.
dike.
All right.
But and usually if you were the person watching, you wouldn't be laying down with
Yeah.
just your head out.
Yeah.
And working in 5-man teams, you'd keep 1 or 2 people awake at all times. You would think that night ambushes and roving patrols would be exciting and something to worry about, but after you've done it so long, you become accustomed to it, and it's very boring work.
Hmm.
And it's hard to stay awake out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Did you have any radio contact at all with the base? You had a radio operator or anything?
We had our RTO radio operator. I was a squad leader. And we had point man. As we were moving, it would be your point man. The guy behind him that I would usually follow, the RTO behind me, and then our rear security. And every so often, as we were going out to our ambush sites, we would stop and look around, check the area, excuse me, to see if we had anybody following us or anybody in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a roving patrol, that'd be plotted on our, excuse me, the roving patrol would be one that would have certain checkpoints that we would go to during the night, and we'd spend a couple hours, maybe an hour and a half in each place, and then we'd radio back and tell the command center that we were moving again, and we would go to our next checkpoint. How you maneuvered at night was you would have one man that would pace, another guy would be your compass man. Usually your point man would be your compass man, and the guy behind him would keep pace so he'd know how far he was going, how many meters from one checkpoint to the next, and so on.
Okay.
And that's how we maneuvered at night.
And how would he know that? I mean, it's dark and all that sort of stuff. How would he know how far he's gone? Has he got...
Okay, I would have a map. I'm sorry. I'd have the map with me, and we would have it lined out on the map where we were
All right,
going,
okay.
how far to each checkpoint.
Okay.
And then we're only 5, so we all knew what was what.
Yeah, okay.
And it was important that we all knew how to work all the system, because if something were to happen, you may
Yeah.
be the one doing it.
Right, yeah, true, okay.
And it had happened a few times that way.
Now, and how long would these patrols be?
Usually during all hours of darkness. We would leave about 7 o'clock at night
Uh-huh.
during the winter months.
Yeah, and depending on what the moon does, how long you
Yeah.
stay out.
True.
Would you take rations with you? Food?
Sometimes. Most time we would, because we would try to sleep during the day. And our days and nights were completely reversed. So we would usually catch a meal at the mess hall, and then we'd take our rations with us. We had what we call LRP rations, long-range reconnaissance patrol rations. And they were freeze-dried food, but most of the time we would use sea rations, which was different cans that had portions of meal in each can.
Yeah. And when you, as a group, 5 guys together, decide it's time to have a meal, you find a safe and secure place, you think it is anyway, and all sit down to eat, or you got a guard out there? How you do that?
Usually you ate when you got hungry, and usually hadn't thought much about this, but we would eat probably as we would start our shift of being awake. You'd all be awake for a while you're out there, and then when maybe 10 o'clock at night we'd start breaking into shifts where one person would be awake and the others would rest, or two would be awake and the others would rest. While you were resting, of course you wouldn't have to eat, but when you woke up for your turn to pull the guard, then that's usually when you would eat.
Okay, all right, all right. Now you're talking about going out and would occasionally set up ambushes. Are you astride a trail that the Viet Cong uses, or what are you trying to ambush? What's going on?
Most of the time we would set off a trail about 30 meters, just far enough where we'd be able to listen or observe somebody coming along that trail,
Mm-hmm.
or we would be sitting in a tree line. Never in a village. We got shot at a lot of times from villages, but we couldn't shoot back.
Oh, really?
They wouldn't allow it for fear we'd hit a civilian. So, and a lot of times we'd set up in graveyards. Use them for the tombstones is a device for protection.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you get into a village and you're being shot at, but you can't return fire, you would, I would assume, whoever's firing upon you is the enemy.
You're right, it would be.
But if you can't return fire, then you're somewhat limited in approaching the enemy.
That's true. Either we would try to get in, if it were possible, to get in to the village and seek those people out and isolate them. Or if we were too far from the village and they were just taking shots at us, we would call back and they would fire illumination flares, artillery flares for us. And that usually stopped it.
Okay. All right. Ambush now, go back to that situation. You're laying some yards off the trail or off of the path that you're,
Sure.
Is this large groups of Viet Cong going through, or is this one or two people at a time? What do we?
Well, at one time, most time it's just small groups of people that are messengers or carrying maybe supplies. But we have run across on two different occasions the North Vietnamese armies had come through and caught us. One time we did open up and they scattered. One time they come directly toward us and we held fire and we didn't open up. They didn't know we were there until they were out of range. Then we called it in. Our RTO, the radio operator, had the handset buried beneath him so it wouldn't, somebody would have to do is break squelch or talk on the radio and it would broadcast and
Yeah.
he would know where we were. So
Yeah.
he had that buried beneath him and we just stayed there until they got far enough away. Then we called in artillery and then we got some more reinforcements out. And they did catch him.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Were you involved in firefights during some of these ambush patrols?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, and I'm going back to the villages. The people that shoot at you aren't necessarily soldiers that you can identify as soldiers. Are these people that are going down the trail, are they identifiable as soldiers, and that this is the enemy that you can shoot back at?
There's a curfew in Vietnam at a certain time of night. I think it was about 7. The curfew was in effect. If anybody was out walking around outside the village after those hours, they were the enemy.
Okay.
Sometimes the North Vietnamese would come through and they would be in uniform. And they'd also be carrying weapons.
Is this a free fire zone after a certain time at night?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. And would you, on occasion, have to spend the night out on one of your patrols and can't get back into the base, or not? Typically not.
After we had blown what we call blowing the ambush, or opening fire. When it quieted down, then we would return to base camp.
Okay.
There's no sense going any further.
Yeah.
We're too small to stay out there.
Yeah. Okay. You returned to base in the early morning hours, presumably.
We usually tried to travel during the hours of darkness. We would leave during darkness and we would return during darkness.
Yeah. So you've got to recross your perimeter and recross your lines and all that stuff. So you had passwords and all that. How did you get through your own lines?
We called back to our command center. They called the bunkers and said the patrol's coming in and hold fire, and they would.
Okay. All right.
One interesting story that happened one time, I don't know why, our point man cut. We were in a larger group. Usually we worked in 5-man teams. This time I think we had 7 or 8 of us out. For some reason, the point man cut inside the fence. Now the first fence you have on our perimeter is a cow fence. It just keeps cattle from walking into the minefield, which would be the next fence.
Mm-hmm.
But many times this cow fence will have a trip flare on it. Our point man, for some reason, walking on the rice paddy dike, which is not a very good thing to do anyway, because that's where booby traps are set.
Yeah.
Got inside the fence, the first line. We all knew that that was a safe area to walk if you got inside it. But coming back out again, he hit a trip flare. The bunkers are right behind us, so we all dove in the water and prayed that they wouldn't open up on us.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They all knew we were out there. So the bunker line held quiet. But that was the end of our evening. We returned to base camp then.
Okay, so that's when you get back to base camp after a night out. That's the end of your work day for that particular day. So then you're going to go back and shower and sleep or eat, or what's the rest of your day like?
Well, usually we would get back too early to eat anything because we were subject to eat in the mess hall that was closest to our unit. Sometimes referred to us as a bastard unit. We were comprised of many different units, and we didn't have one particular one that we belonged to.
Okay.
So whatever mess hall happened to be closest to us is where we would eat. Returning at, say, 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 in the morning, it's too early for the mess hall. So during the monsoon season, we'd be soaking wet. And we wouldn't climb into our bed. We wouldn't want to take our clothes off because we were going to eat in a little while, so we would lay on top of our foot lockers. And we would sleep there on our foot lockers, on our back for maybe an hour and a half, then get up and walk over to the mess hall to eat. Then we can come back, shower, and get into our bed for some rest.
Okay.
Before it got too warm to rest any longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What kind of conditions were you living in? Tents?
We had, for a while, lived in tents with sandbags that were up maybe about 4 feet. Then we moved into more of a billets where they were wooden with metal roofs. Then we moved to another location. We moved to 3 different locations while we were at this base camp in the 2 years that I was doing this.
Each one better than the last?
Sometimes. I think they were trying to move us closer to the perimeter and out if they could. We were scavengers. We were always helping ourselves to whatever we could. I don't know if I should tell this story or not. We were always looking for vehicles. And I'll tell the story anyway because I won't mention anybody's name. I couldn't remember who it was and I could. We went into another large base camp where there was a club, and we decided we wanted a Jeep. Well, we just took a bolt cutter and cut the chain that wrapped the steering wheel to keep anyone from taking the Jeep, and we helped ourselves to the Jeep, and we knew how to get it into the base camp without going through a main gate because we knew where all the perimeter was able to let us go in. We changed the numbers on the vehicle, and we had ourselves a Jeep that We did a lot of different things over there. It was probably make good stories, but probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah. But we all know that that takes place and that happens without,
It does.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no. Did you? How long a stretch would you be doing this patrol work? That is to say, would you go out every night for a month, or every 5 days a week, or what were you? What kind of a work schedule did you have?
We were okay. Our unit at the strongest point was about 30 men. At the least, we were 5. So when we were down to 5 people, we would be going out probably every other night. And when we were stronger, we would go out maybe 2 nights and be off 1, and it would vary. But we'd also have day patrols too. When we were stronger, we would go out on APCs and would patrol out further. We would also work with rolling bulldozers, which was clearing the jungle. That was after it was defoliated.
Uh-huh.
That was in one of the heavier areas where they had sprayed. And once the vegetation was dead, then they would plow it down to remove it, and then the order was given, go ahead and light up if you got them, and don't worry about where you throw your matches. And then we'd ignite it.
And this is the perimeter, enhance the perimeter around the base?
It did. It also, different areas where there were problems, like there were some places that were set up for rocket mortar fire that we knew of that were good. I've got pictures of that where we've gone into places where houses are, and where during our day patrols we'd go into some places where the rice was still hot and nobody was around. You knew where you had to go to try to find them.
When you're in your unit of 30 to 5 men, depending on circumstances, who was in command? Was this a lieutenant or a captain, or?
I had 4 different commanders while I was over there. I think 2 were first lieutenants and 2 of them were captains.
Okay. So this is kind of a platoon of 30 guys. About platoon size.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you were able to reach that strength, because units were reluctant to give people to the patrol force because they want them back there to do whatever, if they were engineers or if they were an airplane mechanic or whatever, they hated to give people up.
Yeah.
So we lost a lot of people that way, wouldn't we?
Well, being an airplane mechanic, you've got to learn the tricks of the trade on what to do on patrol. Did you have a mentor or somebody to help you do that, or take you out and kind of lead you through the process a couple of times before you go on your own?
Well, I was one of the original members of the Full Oil Patrol, and before we were active outside the perimeter, we went through about 30 days in-country training.
Okay.
And that was the only training that the Full Oil Patrol had. From then on, as people were being replaced, you would just get your training in as you went out with the patrol.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Now, when you're down to 5 men, you go out pretty frequently. When you got 30, you get a day or 2 off.
That's true.
Was there some sequence when you could earn R&R or go to Saigon or go to Australia, or did you ever have a chance to do any of that?
Excuse me. Yes. I was on 3 R&Rs while I was in Vietnam. And people...
That's one a year kind of thing?
Yeah, basically it was 1 a year whenever you could. I was fortunate enough to get away 3 different times out of country R&R.
Okay.
I went to Singapore the first time, Kuala Lumpur the second time, and Sydney, Australia the third time.
And how long are these? A week?
6 days if I remember right. Yeah.
Okay. that is it helpful to have an R&R? I mean, do you kind of get renewed after? This is pretty intense stuff you're going through in country.
I'll tell you, when you're young, you don't think about things. When you work in the military, you're working as a unit all the time, and it just feels like part of what you're doing. I mean, for me to, at 64, to think of going out, and sleeping in a rice paddy all night is unforgivable, but then it just became a natural thing to do.
Yeah.
And you became used to it.
Yeah, sure. You got this bit of memorabilia here, propaganda. Where did you pick that up? And
This was actually found a short distance out of our base camp, and this one says, GI don't take part in any operations, move forward or shoot, or they're trying to tell us that. And I remember one in particular said, you fought your Civil War, why don't you go home and let us fight ours? And
so this stuff is intended for GIs.
oh yes, definitely. I don't know, the backside might have been Vietnamese, but
If you do all those things, you return home safely,
yeah.
it says.
But they would put them in areas that we would be walking through for us to find.
Okay, all right. And talk a little bit about this shrapnel that you've picked up.
Okay, this is, these two pieces are some remnants of the shrapnel that would come off of rocket that they would fire into our base camp. They weren't intended to hit us as a patrol. This went actually into the base camp itself to destroy aircraft and buildings.
This is aircraft launched rockets, or?
No, it was, they would fire them off stands. They'd set them up and they'd aim them with aiming stakes and things, and it'd be a rocket to be fired into the base.
This stuff's just laying around the countryside on the base.
Right, that's how I found that. It after it exploded and ripped through the air and settled somewhere, I picked a few pieces up.
Okay. Talk a little about the Army Commendation Medal you received.
Okay, actually I've received two of them.
Yeah, we've got two of them here. This one and...
Okay, this was just for a period of time that I was over there. They awarded it to me just for achievement of being there so long.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is for Valor, the
V on it,
device.
Yeah.
And it was a patrol that I had taken out one night.
You're in charge of the patrol?
Actually, that night, kind of a mixed thing that happened. The lieutenant didn't always come out with us. That night he did, so we had a 6-man team. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. A tree line a ways from us, I thought I saw some movement. I was looking through the starlight scope and I thought, there's somebody moving over there. Well, everybody took a look. No one saw anything, and they finally said, well, maybe not. And about the time everybody had given up, including myself, thinking, well, maybe I did see something, maybe I didn't. A helicopter flew over and they opened up on the helicopter from that tree line. Helicopter happened to be a Firefly mission, which just has a bunch of lights around it, and they just illuminated. There were about 4 or 5 guys that were in there. They dropped some white phosphorus grenades down on them, and I brought the team down to see if we could get them, and we didn't get there in time. We chased them up over a ravine and down another hill. All this is at night, so.
Yeah.
And I was throwing grenades into different places that I thought they could be at, and so they awarded me the Army Commendation Medal. It's not as a high medal as a Bronze Star, but and there's not too many of them given out with V devices.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you got a couple of Bronze Stars besides.
One is for meritorious achievement. That's the one that you see here, it doesn't have a V device. And again, it was just probably for the Tet offensive that I was in, and just we actually got into a 9.5-hour firefight outside our base camp. 68 Tet offensive, 4 regiments were supposed to be going into Saigon, and we didn't by ourselves, but the 4th one was, we were part of a unit that stopped the 4th one from going into Saigon.
Oh.
And we'd taken out somewhere around 200 enemy out of that village that night. So that's probably where the meritorious achievement one came from, was during the Tet offensive.
Mm-hmm.
The other one happened during a firefight during the day. We were going through a rice paddy area, and normally how you set up to move through an open area is you set up kind of how geese fly. You have a point person, and then the others kind of follow back this way.
Mm-hmm.
If your enemy attacks you from the front, you can all fire forward, or if they're in the back, you can all fire backward. Or if to the side, you can just come up on line either direction. For some reason, we really got into a silly situation where we had 2 of these groups side by side. It never had happened before and hasn't happened since in the patrol, but for some reason that's what took place during that day. I think we just wanted to cover a larger area in this rice paddy area. It was also kind of a tunnel complex area that we worked in. We used to do some of that too. We do our own tunnel rats. But the enemy, well, you had Banco, our point man. I was over here, and Earl was over here in that V formation. When the enemy was here, they opened up on our side. Well, I immediately turned and fired back into where the enemy was, and then somebody yelled that Earl had been hit, realizing that Earl was right where I was shooting. So I thought I'd shot Earl. I ran over to him, and I can still to this day see the bullets hitting in the rice paddy beside me as I was running toward him.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't thinking about anything other than I probably shot him, and I had to go take care of him. Our point man, who that day received the Silver Star for actually knocking down the enemy, the medic and myself received the Bronze Star for going in trying to help Earl, and Earl didn't make it. He was the first hole that I found in the body was on the side that I had shot from. It was a small hole, and I thought for sure I'd hit him. Then when we lifted up his shirt, I could see that there was another small hole here. He was so close to where the enemy was that the bullet had fired right through him and didn't enlarge as it went through. It was all soft tissue, but he didn't live. And we later got him to the helicopter and out of there. But he was one of the casualties of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We lost probably, while I was with the patrol, probably 6 to 8 guys.
Really?
But
out of a unit of maximum 30, that's
Yeah.
a pretty high percentage.
but it's 2 years' time too.
Yeah, yeah, right. Well, the Tet Offensive, talk a little bit about that. That, as I recall the news stories about that, that was, that kind of took us by surprise. Tet was a holiday for them normally, and we didn't anticipate this kind of offensive at that point.
No, it's a Chinese holiday, and it's their New Year, and they feel if they can have a fight and win a fight during that first day of the new year, that, you know, better things would look their way. And as a foot soldier over there at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't aware of holidays or others or anything else. All I know is there was a lot of movement that was taking place, and we had to go out there. We were out there working with the 1st Infantry, mechanized infantry, and we had a company of them. We wouldn't have been able to take care of it on ourselves. We were supposed to go behind the village and back up whatever they forced through that village. And we wouldn't have been able to take care of that either. It was, as I say, a regiment in there. It was
Yeah.
a large body of people. We evacuated the village, and we brought all the people out of the village that we could, and everything was dead around us. I had pictures of part of the firefight that we were in. You might see those later.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You also have received a Purple Heart.
Right. That wasn't the most spectacular thing that ever happened, unfortunately. But I did get one from what it was. There was a suspicious hole in the ground, and we worked with C4 grenades, different things, and we blew up different shells, like an artillery round or an M79 grenade that would be launched out there, and we would blow them up in place rather than let the enemy have them.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened to be one of those rounds that I detonated, and it piece came back and got me in the leg. Is what really happened.
Okay. Did you stay in the hospital there, or did you come back to the States?
No. I stayed in field hospital there.
Okay. And then went back to your same unit?
Yes.
Okay. So the rest was appreciated, the time in the hospital?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I've spent a few times there in the hospital. But
Yeah.
that wasn't so severe. It was a small piece that got me in the leg, and didn't really cause that much damage. The shrapnel's still in my leg
Is it?
because
Okay.
it was small enough to not bother to get out. It would do more damage trying to retrieve it,
Mm-hmm.
so we left it.
And when were you promoted to sergeant?
Oh, probably, I don't know, it's so hard to think back, some 40 years now. It was probably about 9 months before I left country.
Before you left country, okay. And when you were promoted to sergeant, did you then have a squad, or were you in charge of 4 or 5 men, or how did that had change your position, or in the
really,
group?
Didn't change it too awfully much, because at that time I'd spent so much time with the Full Oil Patrol that I knew all the ins and outs about what was going on. I knew the area around that base camp probably as well as the villagers did.
Okay,
So it didn't change much of anything other than I got a pay raise.
okay, all right. You've got a picture here of Ho Chi Minh. Give us a little background on this.
Okay, that was...
It's pretty sensitive to.
It is. It's been more or less in the cardboard, like you see it there for about 40 years now. I rarely do I bring it out, but I'll leave it with you. It was actually an award given to the North Vietnamese that he, much as our decorations are given to us, they get things like photographs of Ho Chi Minh.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And you can see that there is a couple, that is a bullet hole that sliced through it there, and then I think another one came through here.
Uh-huh.
And it was found in a pack that the North Vietnamese had on them.
Okay, so you took this off of a Vietnamese.
Yes.
So that's doesn't have quite the importance to us as it did to the
No.
Vietnamese gentleman, but that's an interesting way of rewarding their crews for that. Okay, now you came back to the when you came back to the States, 1969 was it?
Right.
You'd done your tour or beyond your tour duty, or?
I was on orders once while I was in Vietnam to go to Germany, and I declined it.
Oh,
I preferred staying where I was until I got out of the service. I think it's just one of those things that you're so used to working with a group of people, and it's such a tight-knit group that you just didn't want to pull away from it. I couldn't envision myself coming back to the States or being in Germany playing soldier after being over there.
yeah,
It'd be too hard to do.
yeah. I mean, it would be playing soldier.
It would be.
Yeah.
So I'd rather stay where I felt like I was doing the most good. I was over in Vietnam. I fought like I believe my dad did during the Second World War when he was fighting. And I had the same impression in my mind that I was doing much as he was doing back then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And was your enlistment up? Is that why you were sent back in '69?
Yes.
So they were honoring your enlistment time frame.
That's correct. Actually, if you were within 5 months of your time of getting out of the service, they would let you out of the service early. So I guess I kept staying a little bit longer so I could get that 5-month break and get out of the service earlier
Okay.
and go back to school.
Yeah. All right. So you came from Vietnam to you landed in Hawaii, or airlifted out, or how did you get back to the States?
No, I flew back in the Freedom Bird. That's
Okay.
what we referred to them as, and they would fly over our base every so often as we go into Benoit, and we'd look forward to the day that we could be on them. Interesting.
Before you get there, now you don't wear this kind of uniform when you're at these bases.
No.
You're wearing fatigues and constantly. Do they reissue you uniforms in Vietnam before you get on the Freedom Bird?
No, actually, I had this with me all the time I was there.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And this was issued to me in '65 when I
Oh, all right.
joined the service.
All right. Very good.
And
So
I weighed about the same then. I couldn't put it on now if I tried, but
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And what's the arm
okay.
braiding for?
Hopefully your camera will not pick up the brass that I didn't shine in the last 40 years, but this is an infantry braid. And this is the combat infantry badge
Yes.
that I earned while I was over there. I was a crew chief on single-engine fixed-wing aircraft. That's what the
All
wings
right.
are.
That's crew chief, right?
Right.
And
And then Bronze Star,
Bronze Star with the
Army.
cluster.
right. The Army Commendation Medal, the Purple Heart, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Ribbon. This is the Vietnamese Campaign Ribbon, and this is the Vietnam Service Ribbon.
Okay. Very impressive. The
Yeah.
combat infantry badge is earned.
Yes.
It's not given to everybody by any means. So.
No, and we had a tough time trying to get it because we were not a regular infantry unit.
Mm-hmm.
We were, in some of the paperwork I did bring, I believe you'll see the orders in the paperwork somewhere
Yeah.
too that I
Okay.
tells you everything that I have, I do have.
Yeah. You came back to the States in '69 to
Yes.
where'd you land? The Sacramento area?
Landed at Oakland Army Terminal,
Okay.
and from there I came home to Seattle.
Okay.
I went to work in a mill, and
Discharged at that time. Did you
Yes.
have to do reserve time?
no,
Okay.
inactive reserve.
Yeah. Okay.
So my military days are over at that time.
Uh-huh. And did you, were you married in Seattle before you went in or after you got back?
No, after I was discharged, then
Okay.
it was a while after that I
Okay.
married and eventually went to school under the GI Bill.
Okay. Used your GI Bill?
Yep.
That's good.
And first degree was in forestry. And I did that for a number of years and then worked other occupations such as heavy equipment for a little bit. Then I worked in the armored truck business and was manager in Salem, Oregon for a number of years there. And went back to school after I think I was in my 40s, I went back to school again. And this time I got an engineering tech degree, and that carried me through what I'm doing now. I'm working as an inspector for highways and sewage
Okay.
treatment plants. And
Okay.
various civil projects.
Yeah. Okay. Um, how would you sum up your time in the Army? Was this something you can't forget, or don't want to forget, or is it something that has influenced your life from there on?
You know, it's carried me through many different facets of my life. I think the most important thing that I had learned while I was in the service was to be of service. I think that was one of the hardest adjustments I had to overcome when I came back to the United States, got out of the service, was I was used to giving. I was used to watching out for everybody else.
Yeah.
And everybody else was used to watching out for me. And it worked well that way.
Yes.
Well, getting out of the service, other people enjoyed me watching out for them, but nobody watched out for me any longer.
Mm-hmm.
And that part was hard.
Yeah. Well, that's
But I also learned how to keep track of my surroundings at all times. Being in reconnaissance, you're watching out. You learn that very early. And I do to this day. I keep a strong vigilance of what is on around me, and it helps me in my job now because equipment moves around, dozers
Yeah, right.
and excavators and things are always moving around me, and I'm always aware where things are.
where they are and what they're doing. Yeah.
And I'm aware of where my surroundings are. When I was in the fire department, I was a volunteer fireman for a number of years as a civilian, and I was aware of what was going on with traffic. It was around me when I was out on an aid call, or what was going on with a fire, where escape routes might be in a fire, and
Yeah.
so I learned to watch. Even today, when I go into a store that I hadn't been in before, I can tell you where the exits are in the next couple of minutes after I've been in there.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
because I want to know where things are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd say that's a good trait
It
to
is.
have learned and taken heed of. Yeah.
I spent years. One of my occupations was I worked for State of Washington Employment Security, and I was a DVOP, which was a Disabled Veterans Outreach person. I worked with disabled veterans, helping them find work. For about 4 years, that's primarily what I did, is just talk to veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore it's easier for me to talk about my experiences, because talking to a vet 8 hours a day for 4 years, it's not that difficult to speak of my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And probably helped me in some ways too, that I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. 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 Well, what brought you to Idaho?
Work. Mostly I wanted to get away from the Seattle metropolitan area and get out further into the country. We lived in Coeur d'Alene for about 7 years before moving here 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm finding my work back up in Coeur d'Alene again. But that's the way it goes. I work for a private company, and the company could be anywhere in the United States. I've been in Austin, Texas for about 5 months. I was up in Anchorage, Alaska for a while.
Oh, really?
So wherever the work happens to be, I go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to say how much I appreciate your candid report on talking about your experiences in Vietnam, and I thank you so much for that. But I also
Thank you.
want to say, we all of us thank you for your service
Thank you.
in the military. So you and your wife have children here with you now?
No, we don't. The children are all over in Western Washington. And there are 2 daughters and 1 son.
Okay.
One of the daughters is my current wife, and the son and daughter are of my previous marriage. And I was married 11 years, and it just one of those things. After 11 years, didn't seem to work out the way we would want it to.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually married another time, and that didn't work out very well, but it also lasted 11 years. And just recently I celebrated my 13th anniversary, so I broke that chain.
That's good. That's good.
I like marriage.
And where did you get this?
Okay, that was also found in one of the packs that we had taken off the enemy. I think what had happened was they retrieved this out of one of the villages and they just stuffed it in their pack when they left.
Okay.
This is a South Vietnamese.
It is a South Vietnamese.
Yeah.